Hello, hello. Here we are again, broadcast team Alpha. And something incredible has happened that has only happened to us once before in 5 years. And I'm going to tell you, and you're going to see just very shortly. First of all, I want to say we are here. We are on 3 TV stations and 19 platforms of our own and 32 platforms through Cosmic Awakening Network. So we are close to 50 platforms we're getting out there now. So this is phenomenal. And we have chosen a little different route than many of the others, that all they care about is to get many numbers on YouTube. But we decided to go wide, because we reach more people and we can affect more lives that way, is our thinking on it. And hopefully it's a good thinking. Anyway, we are here for some cutting-edge conversations, discussing quantum possibilities today. And my name is Agi, and my co-host Nori cannot be here tonight because a friend of hers fell, and Nori, being a nurse, she had to run over and see how badly she was hurt. So we wish them well, and we send in some good thoughts, and everything will be okay. On top of that, we had a guest tonight that was Paul Wallace in Australia. He was going to get on, but he woke up this morning in Australia. That's tomorrow, you know. So he was sick. He just couldn't do the show, and I found out just a few minutes here before the show. And the best thing I can do is to call 2 friends of mine, and they saved us, because we're going to have Preston Dennet and Dolly Saffron here with us. They are some of the most interesting and wide-scoping experiencers and UFO researchers in the country. And we're going to discuss probably some 8 to 10 of the most interesting cases that people have run into when it comes to the extraterrestrial issue or the interdimensional contactee issue. So anyway, just don't go anywhere, because this one's going to get good too. And let's see, I also want to give a shout out to Conscious Awakening Network. Go to look up Conscious Awakening Network. We are transmitting also through them, which puts us on Roku and all kinds of different places out there. So they are a compilation of a lot of different hosts that is putting their shows through there. So it's kind of in one place you can get about 30 different shows that you can choose from. So go have a look at it. I think that will be a very interesting journey for you. And of course, let me also tell you how you can get a hold of us. You can get us on broadcastteamalpha.com and also on YouTube, Broadcast Team Alpha, that's the same name, and 40 other platforms you will find us. So I'm sure you can find us somewhere. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. It's going to help us a lot. And also, if you're watching us on any other platform, please like us, but try to come to YouTube and watch it there instead, because that's where we monitor the chat room. And you can participate in the conversation and talk to other people and see what they think about things and so on. So it's going to get interesting. And also, I want to tell you about a spiritual think tank that Nori and I have put together. We've done that for 3 years now. We have an incredible group of people there, phenomenal minds. And we are doing things that, according to the laws of physics, should not happen, but it does. We bend the laws of physics sometimes, and it seems like we are creating out of seemingly nothing sometimes, especially when it comes to healings and also abundance. And we have been pretty good at creating rain out of pretty much clear skies to put out fires and stuff. And if you want to get in touch with us and have a look at that and see, and possibly see if there's anything there for you that you want to participate in, send us an email to themastermindconnection@gmail.com. themastermindconnection@gmail.com. And I'm going to introduce the guest here in just a second, but there's something I want to tell you first. And it deals with the real power of the spoken word and the power of thought. And that is something that happened to Nori and I 2 days ago. We were talking, and I told her that, what are we going to do? We should plan ahead a little better than what we have done. What are we going to do about if somebody just cancels the show about a half hour before the show? We got to find another guest, or we got to find something to talk about. So, and she told me, and I think I'll quote it, "Why do you want to create that?" I said some lame things about, I'm not creating, I'm just like to plan ahead. Yeah, she said, we're good at this. We says, we can handle it. And that's where we left it. 2 days ago, I said that. Today, Paul Wallace in Australia texted me a little over a half hour before the show and said that I woke up with some swelling. I can't do the show. Folks, did you get that? We just talked about it, and it happened. I wish it wouldn't, but boy, oh boy, was that powerful. Proof that your spoken word and your thoughts can create in your reality. Just think about that. Some of the stuff you say about people or yourself, man, think that over. Because you create your own reality. I've been saying now for a long time that whatever you allow to dwell in your mind the most is what you're going to have in your life. Okay. That was my message for today. And now let's go ahead and enjoy the guests. I have Preston Dennet and Dolly Safran with us. And this was so fast, I really didn't find a good way to create any introduction to speak of. But Preston, he is a best-selling author. And he just got a book about, I think maybe a little bit ago, about I think it was the 10 most interesting UFO cases that he had run across. And this is going to be good because I had a peek at them, and boy, oh boy, I tell you, you're going to like it. And then Dolly, she is a retired nurse. Sorry, Nori is too, but she's not here. And she is an experiencer. I talked to her. In fact, we did a show before once, and she had some phenomenal experiences. And I would like for us to talk a little bit about that, because there are some things that many of us, we know these things are possible. We know it happens, but then we forget and we slide back into the box again and we keep doing what everybody else is doing. We got to keep thinking forward and thinking outside of the box. And these two people are two of the best people to bring that message to you. So welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, I talk way too much. Now it's your turn. I looked at your book there, Preston, and even the cover looks good. So do you have some phenomenal cases in there? I don't know, where would you guys, there's so much to talk about. Where do you think we should start on this 45-minute journey?
Oh gosh, there's 20 different chapters, each outlining separate person or people, really, his experiences. But one that comes to mind, which is really special to me, involves a gentleman who's actually from Argentina. It's not often I get to interview people who are out of the U.S., but with this book, I did have the opportunity to interview someone from France, someone from Peru, someone from, all over the world, really, Canada, across the U.S. But this gentleman, his name is Hector Sawiak, and he contacted me because he had an experience which quite baffled him, and this involved a healing. And he wanted some information about this and found my book about UFO healings. And so that's why he reached out to me. I love this man. He's an excellent witness. He was a bank manager for Argentina's largest bank. He's a pilot with many hundreds of hours of experience, a commercial pilot. So just a fantastic witness who had no history of encounters. So this is unusual because usually contact starts at a very young age. Does not appear to be true in his case. It started because he expressed an interest in UFOs. And this does happen. You reach out to them, they reach out to you. And how this happened was super interesting because he heard about UFO sightings in his area and wanted to see a UFO. He'd always been kind of interested and believed in them, but that was really it. He didn't think about them that much. But went out of town, got a telescope, binoculars, and spent the night outside of the city because, the city lights block everything. And was really disappointed when the clouds rolled in and he didn't see anything. So he left kind of, disgruntled, a little bit unhappy about the whole trip because it was a good hour to get out there. And it was that evening he went to bed and was woken up in the middle of the night, about 3 a.m., by someone calling his name, Hector, Hector, in his mind, telepathically. So he instantly jumped out of bed. He's not sure why he did this. He ran to the window and looked out and saw a brilliant yellowish white light zooming across the sky. Now he knows objects in the sky, planes and satellites and so forth. And this was none of those. He says it was brilliantly light and moved pretty much in a straight line, but it was too slow to be a meteor. It lasted a good, 5 or 10 seconds and way too fast to be any conventional aircraft. And besides, he felt like it called him out to the window. And it was just a short time, about a week or two after this, that again, he was lying in bed and woke up and saw two beings, one about 5.5 feet tall, one about 6 feet tall. Both were wearing kind of these shiny blue jumpsuits. They had really pale skin, very large eyes, but weren't really grays as we think of them, more human looking. And he was terrified, instantly overwhelmed with fear, until they said, "You have no need to fear. We are not here to hurt you. We are here to heal you." And he said his emotions did a 180-degree turnaround, and he felt and I'll just quote him, "a love like I've never felt before." We've all felt intense love for our partners, perhaps, or our child, or a sibling, or parents, and so forth. He said it actually was beyond that. This was an overwhelming, all-encompassing love that he had never felt before. And one of these beings walked up to him and actually cradled his head and said, "We are here to heal you." This was odd because he wasn't sick, not that he was aware of, but this being pulled out a little pill. It was just a tiny little thing, triangular shaped, and told the man to eat it, told Hector to eat it, which he did obediently. Had no taste. He had no fear whatsoever. He just swallowed it. And he was crying just out of love for this being, and fell asleep. Woke up in the morning, he could still feel the tears. His pillow was wet. The beings were, of course, gone at this point. And he told his family what happened, and they didn't know what to make of it because this came out of the blue. But they did support him. They did believe him. And further questioning revealed he had no prior encounters Nothing happened after this. The only real effect was that he felt slightly nauseous for about a week. But yeah, that's basically it. But I like this story because it defies sort of the standard model of contact. People describing being taken on board and having a scary abduction, so to speak. And
did he say what did they look like? Did he say anything about that? They look like us, or did they look great?
Yeah, they were very human looking, but their skin was more pale, blue eyes. They did have hair. I believe it was blonde, and slightly larger heads. Not really. Very, very thin. So basically, you're human-looking ET. Sometimes we call them Nordics. I don't really like that term. I think it's a little misleading because I do have cases of human-looking ETs involved.
What does he do now? I mean, since you've spoken to him, what was his life path? Did he tell you that?
Yeah, he's really obsessed with becoming educated. In fact, following this, he's decided to pursue more degrees in education and consciousness. So he's really pursuing that. He loves sports, he loves astronomy, he's really into flying, but he's now really much into learning and just learning everything he can about awareness and consciousness. He was using words I had to look up. I don't even know the meaning of some of the words he was saying. I'm like, what is that? Casuistry. I had to look that one up. So yeah, he's really into the whole field of consciousness, which definitely fits in with contactees.
Something like that would really change your life. I don't care who you are. You could be the worst scuzz bucket in the world, and you have something like that happen. It would change you.
Yeah, and it was a recent encounter too, 2015. So not that long ago.
Oh,
that's amazing. Did he report it, or did he just go straight to contact you?
No, he did not report it. He was a bit shy at first, but he did. I said, "Is it all right if I use your real name?" He said, "Oh, absolutely." He was honored to be part of the book, to share his story. He feels it's important that people know that ETs are doing this sort of thing, and he doesn't believe that they are here in any way to hurt humanity or anything like that, which I thought was very refreshing to hear, because he did his research and he found my book and he was shocked because, yeah, that book, Healing Power of UFOs, outlines 300 cases, which, of course, do come from all over the world.
Yeah. So if they got into his bedroom at night, they probably, like the Greys are doing, they're just coming through the wall, I suppose. They are scrambling their being, so they walk through the molecules and the atoms of the wall, and this is a technology that I don't really know how that would work, but there is a lot of different species that is doing this.
Yeah, definitely. Most ET ethnicities use the same exact technology. They're that evolved. They're all pretty much on the same page evolutionary-wise. And it is light technology and dimensional technology. Light technology involves the dimensions. You can facilitate an environment where you leave this dimension, you're half here and half in another one, and that's how they walk through objects, or they come down out of the sky in a beam on an energy ribbon. They are capable of doing that. That's how they, move from place to place when they need to get in real quick. So, yeah.
Yeah. And there are, frankly, people who are psychically evolved on this planet, enlightened masters and mediums who have reported this as well. Brazil's most famous and greatest medium, who could speak like 30 languages in a trance, including dead languages, displayed his ability of levitation in front of a room of scientists. They actually had him bound up, and he went right through the wall into another room that was locked and closed. There's a number of cases like that. So this is apparently an ability that's also psychic as well.
All of it is psychic. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do it out of body, but I haven't been able to do it physically.
Yeah, I don't know about walking through the wall, but that's, I guess, what doors are for. But I now you got some other stories in that book too. You said about several, I mean, 20 some.
Yeah, another one that is a little different, which I just find fascinating because I hadn't heard one personally. I've certainly read about people who've claimed to have seen elves and fairies and dwarves and gnomes. And as you know, if you examine the cultures across our planet, there's a long history of, I would say, little supernatural beings, often very short. But Ireland, for example, has the fairy lore, which is, if you look into it, very compelling. But I never really researched it in depth and never talked to anyone personally, though I did a few times talk to people firsthand, a few contactees who said they'd seen fairy-like beings. But this gentleman, his name is Galen Sharp, contacted me because he wanted to know if I'd ever heard of what he saw. And this was back in 1940, 45, I believe. Yeah, in Englewood, Colorado. He's 4 years old, and suddenly he describes it as looking very much like an elf, comes out through the wall where the bookcase was and introduces himself, gives a name. Galen does not want to give the name. It's personal to him. But this guy was wearing, a shirt, trousers. He was bald, had a little mustache, and was an old man, but was like 3 feet tall. And basically was just a very cheerful little elf. They had a little conversation and said, "I'll see you later," and walked through the wall. So he ran to tell his mom, "Mom, I saw a little man." His mom's like, "Oh, you have an active imagination." And that confused him. He didn't really understand what imagination was. This was real. This was absolutely real to him. He got confirmation of that later, because he thought this was just one visit. But nope, this little being showed up at least 5 or 10 times. These visits were always very short, 5 minutes or so. But he started to share all this incredible spiritual wisdom with Galen, who at that age couldn't really grasp most of what was being said, other than that it was fascinating and just really bent his mind into new ways of thinking. And he knows it was physical because occasionally this little elf-like creature would actually pick up objects and juggle or bounce them on his head or push them over and do anything to make Galen laugh. And he's like, "Listen,"
the guy.
Yeah, he was about 3 feet tall. But they were very close to the same height. But, yeah, he was, definitely not a little kid. This elf-like being. Galen's nickname was Topper because he had long blonde hair that kind of floated around.
Oh my!
So he was really cute himself. But this being had no hair. But yeah, like wore a little green. Kind of old-fashioned clothes. Yeah. Not like button-down dress shirts or anything, but what you might see in the 1800s. Looked like little leather boots. Yeah. And a belt. But one day this little elf showed up and brought a friend who was about a foot taller, 4 feet tall. And that time they were outside and they played on the wood pile and talked for a little bit. He tried to tell his mom and parents, but they just didn't believe him. He's the only one who saw them. And then it turned out that his parents were like, "Well, we have to move." And Galen was really upset because he thought he's not going to see his little friends anymore. And next time they appear, he's going to say, "Come with me." And so that's what happened. They appeared and he's like, I have to move. Can you please follow me? And they became very solemn and said, "No, we cannot follow you. We have to stay with the house, in this area," which he thought was very interesting because later on in hindsight, as an adult, he's like, "I may be the only one who had a, quote, imaginary friend reject him." But no, he doesn't.
Yeah. They lived in the same dimensional space as him. That's why they couldn't go. That's where they lived.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. But it's such an unusual story because he wasn't a lonely kid by any means. He had a sibling. He had many friends. His parents were adoring. There was no abuse going on or anything like that. He was a happy, normal kid. So he doesn't, he can't relate this to the imaginary friends we see in people who are perhaps suffering from a lonely childhood.
Did they have a message for him upon leaving each other?
No, only that they could not come with him. But it did affect him profoundly because later as an adult, he ended up writing some very well-received books, 4 of them, on consciousness and duality and God and very, philosophical topics about enlightenment and these sort of things, which are doing quite well, really. And he speculates that whatever this being was talking to him about, it's probably coming out in his writing. And further questioning, because I asked him, could this possibly have been a screen memory? Because we do see screen memories of people who have ETs.
Yeah.
Anything from owls and deer to cartoon characters, superheroes, clowns. And this would fit in there. But he never experienced anything like an onboard encounter. Mm-hmm. He did, later in life, have 2 or 3 UFO encounters, one fairly close. He and his wife shared a close-up sighting of a saucer. But no, he does not believe this was an extraterrestrial. He doesn't know what it was for sure.
Yeah, these are the small guys that we have a lot of stories about these back in Norway, up in the north there.
Yeah, so Sweden also, Sverige. Yep.
Yeah. Some of them call them trolls, and they call them gnomes or whatever, but they are real because there are so many people that have seen them.
Right.
Seen where they live. There are big trees and there are holes in the trees, and they go in there and they have looked inside of these holes sometimes with flashlights, and they actually see things that resembles chairs and tables in there.
Amazing.
So there's some wild stories that older people back in Norway and Sweden and Finland and in Scandinavia, they have these stories about the experiences. And my mom told me one of those, and it was, it scared her a little bit, so she didn't look in the tree, but the footprint walked up to the hole in the tree, and she just went home. But I wonder what she would have seen if she had looked in there. You never know.
Yeah, I suspect that there are still lots of these little guys around because I was looking into it to see if I could, get other cases like his. And there's ones coming up all the way to the current day. I mean, his was back in 1945. So that's what it is some time ago. But yeah, there are current cases of this. It's really quite astonishing. I had no idea that it was still going on. But yeah, apparently lots of people. I heard accounts of winged fairies and other types of little gnomes and dwarves and you name it. It's like, wow, I did not know.
Well, you got a lot of stories in that book. What is another good one?
Yes, I do have a lot. There's 20. Well, one that comes to mind, which I haven't shared yet, so I thought this would be a good opportunity, involves a lady who does not want her name used. I used the pseudonym Pamela. And she was in her home one day. She's about 22. Her sister is there. Her brother-in-law is about to drive up. And she's got her little 2-year-old and another cousin who's 5 out playing in the front yard when she hears the kids screaming. So one of the people in the house, I think it was her, I'll have to remember this. Let me think for a second. Yeah, it was the brother-in-law. He was there. Went running out to check on the kids because they were screaming. And he's like, Pamela, come out here right now. And runs out there. And there is a huge 50-foot flying saucer right over the tree where the kids are playing. And it's not that high up. It's maybe a couple of 100 feet. It's got little lights all around it. This is daytime, by the way, morning. And it's got this silvery chrome finish to it. So it's reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. It's got little portholes all around it. It's a classic saucer, totally quiet. And she screams. Her brother-in-law is like just frozen in astonishment. He can't talk. He's like, oh my gosh, I don't know. So she goes running for her kids who are running towards her. And she basically runs right under this thing, grabs the kids and runs back. And they stare and watch this thing for about 15 minutes until one of their relatives, her brother, I believe it was, came driving up. And as soon as he did, this thing took off. And so they're all talking about it. He's like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? Like, we just saw this massive flying saucer. And all Pamela could think was, not again, not again, because this has been an ongoing thing in her life. As a very little girl, about 5 or 6 years old, she was biking with her best friend, and they had this object, this oval object, come right down and hover over them. And they biked home, and it followed them home all the way, which was 2 miles. So that was another 20-minute encounter. She finally gets home and runs inside and tells her dad. This is in Maine. And she says, Dad, look at that. Is that a blimp? And her dad looks at it and says, that's a UFO, honey. Her dad was in the military. He's very familiar with aircraft. She's like, really, Dad? He's like, yeah, I've seen them before. That's a UFO. And off it went. And it wasn't long after that. She's 14 years old. This is the big experience. But it certainly wouldn't be the last. She's in her room and wakes up to see these figures coming through the wall. And she did not know what they were. She was raised somewhat religious and thought her first thought was demons. Yeah. Because these short little gray beings with large black eyes, big heads, they were grays. And they surround her bed and grab her arm and say, we want you to come with us. She said, no, I don't want to go. They said, no, it's okay. You don't have to be scared. That made her even more scared because in her mind, she's like, well, if I don't have to be scared, that means I might be scared. Why would you say that unless there's something to be scared of? So that kind of freaked her out. But she felt unable to resist as they pulled her through the wall to the front yard, and she was shocked to see this craft landed on the road right in front of her house. And her first thought was, well, it's covering the entire road. There's no way any cars can get by. This was, of course, in the middle of the night in a small sort of suburb. But they pulled her on board, and she said it was quite cool inside. This was a hot summer night, so inside it was much cooler. And they're taking her to the window of the craft so she can look out. And she got an incredible shock, because by the time she made it to the window, this craft was way above Earth. And looking down, she could see the Earth far below her. She got a little bit of an attack of vertigo, dizziness. And she said, take me home. And they said, well, we need to do this. And basically, she doesn't have clear memories of this, but she does believe she was laid out and examined. She's not entirely sure, but she has some vague recall of that. But what she does remember is about 6 of these little grays lining up when in walks this taller gray, which is more human looking. It's like half gray, half human. And it's wearing this sort of frock or this dress, this gown. And it looks at the grays and looks at her like, what is she doing here? Looks back at the grays like, are you finished? Are you done? And looks at her. And Pamela's like, just please take me home. I just want to go home. And that's pretty much all she remembers. But that turned out, she told her parents the next morning, and her mom's like, please don't talk about this. This can't be true. And her dad's like, really? I totally believe you, honey. We know this is real. And she's like, thanks, Dad. That's really important to me because this did happen. And yeah, throughout life, each of them would have encounters of some degree. Yeah. And she had real strong psychic abilities following this. She married, she had kids, she had one other, if I may, really interesting incident was she stepped outside and this UFO comes really slow over the house. And she's like paralyzed with just amazement. She had stepped outside because her son was late. He was supposed to be home, and she's waiting for him, and it's getting late, and he's like 14 years old. And she's just watching this UFO go slowly by, and it's gone. She runs back inside and tells her husband. He's like, "Why didn't you come out and call me? I would have loved to have seen that." She says, "I couldn't move. I was just amazed." She doesn't feel like she was paralyzed by the craft. It was just the whole shock of seeing it.
Yeah.
So they're out there on the front porch talking about it when their son comes running up. He's like, "Mom, Dad, you're not going to guess what I just saw." Of course, he saw the same UFO. And I'm thinking this was an intentional thing. It showed itself to her and to the son.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
So to me, it sounds like her dad maybe had seen something himself.
yes.
More than likely, it's generally generational with the people on the planet. They keep up with everybody, so not surprised.
Yeah, later her sister saw a UFO landed in the forest. And as I was putting her chapter together, and I sent it to her, and she's like, this is all correct. This is what happened, but I have one thing to add. My son, just recently, this was just like 2-3 years ago, finally admitted that he had something come into his room. And she's like, "Well, what do you mean, honey?" She says, "I don't know how else to describe this other than it looked like a big bug." She's like, "What kind of bug?" Says, "Well, praying mantis would be the closest I could describe it." So he's not really educated on UFOs and doesn't know that this is a thing. And he said, yeah, walked right up to his bed and stood there, and he fell asleep. So, yep, definitely generation.
Yeah. We're a little over halfway into the show, but before we go on to other stories, let people know about that book where you have them all compiled into. Show us that book also, where you can get the book.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this because of my screen.
Maybe move it around a little sideways or something.
There we go.
There you go.
So yeah, it's called Humanoids and High Strangeness, 20 True Encounters. And like, as I said, cases from all over the world involving all kinds of people, reaching back decades all the way up to pretty much the present day. And I really wanted to include a wide variety of really interesting humanoids. So we have little beings, praying mantis, hairy dwarves, angels, religious figures, Bigfoot, an elf, and I mean, you name it, it's there. Human-looking ETs, a variety of grays. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that there's so many different types of humanoids, as Dolly can attest to, because in the book I wrote about her, Symmetry, she's encountered many of these kinds of beings.
Yeah, and that's on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. But there are, have you run into anything that is interdimensional? Something that just kind of poof, shows up?
Yes.
Yes, let's hear about that.
ET craft are biological vehicles. They're created biological so that an entity can indwell it and fly it with a pilot. And it's a psychic connection between the two of them. They fly interdimensionally, and the beings that come into the vehicles are fifth dimensional non-corporeal entities. They are from the fifth dimension, specifically from the fifth. There are other beings that will pilot them as well. I've seen a light being aboard a vehicle that actually blew my mind. They're non-corporeal as well, although they can represent as corporeal if they want to. They can show themselves. There are interdimensional beings who are, much like Preston was describing in his first story, they look like elves, and they do not live in the third dimension, even though they're in the same dimensional space as us. They're in the fourth dimension, almost into the fifth. And all the dimensions are in the same place. Like where you are, I am, and Preston is, are 12 dimensions, 2 below us and 9 above us. And we're all right here together. We are dimensional beings as well. We just don't understand it or utilize it because we're not all using our psychic abilities as we should. they are interdimensional beings, and they visit us all the time. People talk about having guardian angels where they were saved or they were talked out of doing something stupid or whatever. This is an interdimensional being that lives with you, sees you every day, and will make an effort to guide you, counsel you, help you, like a guardian angel. It's amazing. Most people who see angels are seeing light beings who look just like angels. They represent like that. They look like they have wings. Sometimes, because that's religiously, that's what we understand in our mind, they'll show up like that. It's really interesting as all get out. There are a couple other beings that I've seen that are, one of them is very strange to me, and I'm never talking about it with Preston because I don't know how y'all going to accept this or not, okay? One of the things that happened to me when I was young, I grew up mostly in Miami, and I swam all the time, was on boats, in the water, and one of the things that fascinate me are mantis, praying mantis, okay? When they're babies, if you hold them up, they have eyes and a nose and a mouth. They look like little critters, you know, they're very, very cute, with little paws in there, you know, so they can flutter their little flaps. And these beings look like mantis to me, huge, interdimensional beings that are light beings mostly, but they look like mantis. And the first time I saw one, I stood there with my jaw on the ground. I couldn't talk. I mean, I was like amazed, like he described that person. I couldn't move. I was shocked to my core. And then I thought, well, okay, here we go. Why did you represent like a mantis? And he literally said to me, I evolved, and this is one of my representations of my evolution through time. And I was a being much like this at one time. And I thought you would enjoy, because this is how I enjoy representing. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, it just blew me. And then I had 1,000 million billion questions about that, because we have mantis here, and I know that animals are sentient. And I went from there. But yeah, you can, if you have seen something that you can't describe to anybody, and it showed up, or you can see it moving around about you, whatever, you're looking at an interdimensional being. As a psychic, I see beings all the time around me dimensionally, because I have heightened awareness, and everybody else could too. It's amazing. Now, a lot of them work with us through ETs that are third dimensional, like the Greys and the Nordics. And they work cooperatively together to come here and watch over us. We're related to them. And we're supposed to be evolving as well. And we're kind of, you know, important to them as beings go, because we're all consciousness. And that's why you see all kinds of representations back and forth when people are talking. That's why it's so interesting to hear their stories, you know. That's why I like to listen to Preston talk.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned angels, because there's one lady in the book who had all kinds of ET experiences from a little girl on. Lived in a haunted house, so was familiar with apparitions and ghosts as well. Very psychic, had out-of-body experiences. But in a really hard time in her life, because she went through some pretty severe child abuse with her father, who passed away, and then her mother had extremely ill health. And she was having to care for her mother while trying to raise a child as a single parent in a haunted house. And she had just put her mom to bed and went to finally fix herself something to eat pretty late at night, and walked out of the kitchen with her little dog and was going to go upstairs, and the dog stopped and looked up at this thing on the stairwell, and that's when she looked up. They have very high ceilings, cathedral ceilings that go almost 20 feet high, and there at the foot of the staircase was an angel. Now, Janet, as her name, is not religious. She just isn't. And that absolutely shocked her to see something like this. But she says, you know, I don't know how else to describe this as it was an angel, because it had what looked like wings. I said, well, were they wings? She says, well, they looked like it, but it was more like a glowy thing in the shape of a wing, kind of a glowing aura. But it looked at her. It was moving its head and it had a face. And the dog was looking up at it too. It was moving around. It was wavering slightly. And it just emanated love and peace and joy, and gave her a message that said that things are going to get very difficult. Things are going to change for you. It's going to get very difficult, but you will get through it. And it did. It got horrific. Her health declined rapidly, and it was very difficult for her to to get through until her mom actually passed away. But she said without that angel having coming, it gave her the comfort and the courage to face these things that she was going through. And it really helped her. And she said it was so odd because she wasn't religious and she isn't now. You know, it didn't change her to fundamentalist religion, but it definitely made her question things. So I don't know if that was an angel or not, but I don't know. It's an interdimensional being of some kind.
Well, let's when you talk about angels, come to think of it, they're aliens too because they don't live on Earth. God is an alien. He doesn't live on Earth. Everywhere, but he doesn't live here. So these angels, most of them, I think, is projecting themselves as we would see or would like to see them. I have never heard of anybody saying, I saw an angel. He had a big head, slanted eyes, black eyes, and I have never heard that. Have you?
No, I certainly haven't.
No, I've never seen one like that. But you bring up an interesting point. I was taught by ETs that they can biolocate. They bilocate. Okay? In other words, they can be clean across the universe and they'll bilocate to here. They're not exactly all the way in here with us, but we see them and can interact with them pretty much. And then they go, and then the connection drops and they're still home and we're still here. It's like a psychic physical telephone call between 2 points in the universe. It's very, very, very cool. And then I was told that we have the ability to learn how to do that. You know, I haven't achieved it. I don't think I am going to in this lifetime. It's going to take a while for me to, but yeah, I think that biolocation is doable by us because we have those same energies. We're consciousness. We're part of the whole thing. And we can call up that kind of energy to do that. I can remote view, and it's almost the same thing, only I can't send my entire body somewhere for people to see. They can only see my consciousness. And people say, oh, I see a blue orb. Yeah, that's what you're seeing. That's my consciousness, a blue orb. But they can actually physically biolocate. It's amazing. Amazing. Yeah,
there are people on Earth who have done that. Padre Pio reportedly did that. Milarepa, an Indian saint, was well known for that. That's definitely something people have reported. Ordinary people have been seen in locations where they're like, well, I was thinking about going there, but I wasn't there. A very famous case where a whole classroom saw the teacher walked into the class and poof, disappeared. And then later the teacher, she comes running and she says, sorry, I was late. And they're looking at her like, oh my God, what just happened?
Wow.
We are connected a lot more than what we normally would think like. Nori and I do that. There are times we could not necessarily have talked all day, but in the evening, my time, of course, she's on the East Coast, she calls, and about 5 seconds before that the phone rang, I reach for it, and I think, oh, I got to call Nori. How many times have that happened to you?
Oh, billions.
Think of somebody, and boy, they call right then.
I want to ask you a question,
Agi.
Do you think maybe it's possible that you're talking before the show 2 days before was your intuition letting you know that this was actually coming without knowing it? You know, in other words, you had the intuition to know that you need to prepare in case of, and that this person, their spirit, their consciousness already knew the body was going to have a problem and was projecting to you somehow to let you know.
I was wondering that too, actually.
Yeah.
There's different ways.
That may be a possibility. We are that connected. That's the point. We can feel one another. And if we have personal contact with one another and know one another, those connections get deeper and stronger. And if you're preparing for a show, you're working with this person already. I know, because you called me a whole week before and we chatted for a while. You know, you got to become friendly. And I'm just, that's what I'm thinking anyways. So,
you know, when it comes to that connection, I think absolutely everything is possible.
Yes.
I think that I could have somehow connected with Paul in Australia, or it could have been that, see, we create in our own reality and we create everything that is in it. He just happened to be in it.
Right.
Like you are right now.
Doing
So
it, yeah.
when I created that concept being possible, it went into the quantum existence. It's sitting there as potential for physical creation. And then it came back.
Yep. We
So-
intend a lot. Yeah. I know that when I want something in life, in other words, I ask myself, is this something that's good for me? Do I need this or do I want it? And I wonder about how it's going to affect everybody around me first. And then I set the intention in my mind. In other words, I intend for this to happen. My mom knew that I did this, and she used to blow her mind. When I was leaving Pine Mountain, I had a log cabin up there, and I needed to get my parents off the mountain into town near a hospital. They were getting very close to needing to be really close to hospital. And my mom said, "You can't sell the house overnight." And I said, "Watch me." And I intended for it to happen. And I called my neighbor who told me once 2 years before that, if you're ever interested in selling, just call me. I didn't know if he was serious about it or not, but I intended for him to be. And when I made the call, he bought the house 3 days later. And I was able to move my parents in town.
I see contactees. Yeah, contactees do this all the time. I knew this one contactee. We were going out to eat, and she said, "Just need you to know that I usually get my meal for free." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says that, "Don't know why, but the waiters always spill the food on me when it comes." I'm like, "Yeah, right." Of course, it did happen. And I was watching her closely to make sure she wasn't being sly, sticking her foot out and being like, "Hey." No, it just happened. And it was funny because it fell right on her lap. A little piece of it went flinging towards me and hit me right in the face. A tiny little drop, but it was on her. I busted up laughing. I mean, it was funny because she predicted it. And I've watched her manifest stuff by saying, "You know what? I want a boat." And she found this boat super cheap. I couldn't believe it. She's like, "Now I just need a slip to put it. Let's go down to the marina." I'm like, "You'll never find a boat slip. This is Marina Del Rey. These slips cost thousands of dollars a month." She walked right up to one and started making friends with this guy. And he's like, "Sure, you can put your boat here. No problem."
Yeah.
Just manifests it. She was good at it.
I have something too that strengthened this connection with the quantum existence, and that's this one.
The
The dowsing rod, right?
That's a pendulum. Nori made this one.
Pendulum. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And sometimes I take it to the grocery store, check out the food before you buy it, and people kind of look at you funny one day. But this has a way to connect to the quantum existence and give you an answer to questions.
Yeah, I've looked into that actually, because what it does, it's a way to bypass your conscious mind and get your analytical mind to step aside and access your intuition directly. So it's a good tool. It does work. It's very, people are all down on the Ouija board. The Ouija board, honestly, is just a piece of wood. It really is. But it's dangerous to use because a lot of the times people are not using the right energy, and psychic abilities and meditation and white light. And you can call down a low-level spirit.
Yes.
It's similar to that sort of thing because, there's all types of tools. People use tarot cards. I talked to a psychic, Judy Hoffman, who used playing cards, and she read me like a book. I'm like, oh, wow. I mean, she knew names, dates, everything. It was amazing to watch. And she didn't know me. She did not know me. She's very famous.
Once in a while, you run into somebody that's really good. I had that happen one time in Romania. When I was still back in Europe. About a couple of years before I left and went to the United States, I went on a trip, went visiting somebody in Romania, and there was this gypsy. And she just came and she walked, and there was a crowd of us, and she walked into the crowd, grabbed my hand and pulled me into her tent, and she says, "You need a reading." It was kind of an off English, but I could understand her. And she told me things that she had no way of knowing. So there are some really good ones out there. Most of them probably are more or less average, but there are some really good ones. And on the 5th of next month, we're going to have one on here. That's right. That is doing it for Jenny G is coming back to give readings. And that's going to be...
Yeah, I always love getting a psychic reading. It's just so amazing.
Yeah.
One guy, he read me. He's like, well, I see some books above your head. And he said, it's Arthur Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein. Do you read science fiction? I'm like, yeah, I actually own all the books they've ever written. I was huge into science fiction. Still am, honestly, but he knew it. He's like, I see a plane above your head, a little red plane. Does that make any sense? My dad had just bought a little red plane. I mean, it was a mall, a little Cessna, but he saw it and he knew names, dates, people. Some psychics are very general, but when they're specific like that, there's just, it's amazing.
Yeah, once people start pulling out dates and the age of people and things like that, they have it.
Yeah, he started laughing. He says, the spirits are telling me that you want to interview me. I was going to come up to him after the thing. Can I interview? And I laughed and he said, he says, yes, you can. I'm like, thank you. We'll talk. It was funny. Brian Hurst was his name.
Do that? Have you called him yet?
Oh, yeah. He's in one of my books about ghosts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's an amazing medium.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, time is going fast when you're having fun. We're down to the end of the show here. Show the book again and tell where you can find it. Maybe also mention some of the titles of other books that you have.
Let me see if I can get this to actually work.
If you go to Amazon and put in Preston Dennet, it'll show every book he's got on Amazon. That's
doing there.
Humanoids.
Humanoids and High Strangeness, 20 True Encounters. And of course, there's Symmetry. It's an amazing disappearing book. I can't do it. I'm sorry. But yeah, I have a bunch of books. Wondrous, Symmetry, Not From Here, Onboard Encounters, Inside UFOs. I love this subject. I think it's really important that people understand we are not alone. And I appreciate the opportunity, Agi, for having both Dolly and I on the show.
Yeah, and just remember, we'll go to Amazon and put Preston Dennet in the search bar, and then it'll come up several things with his name in it. Click on Preston Dennet in books, and then all of them come up.
right.
So yeah, that's good. So I think that the UFO issue is opening up now. It's comfortable now to talk about it.
Finally, yeah.
When it gets to the point where the government is saying, yeah, we've been talking to them for decades, we just haven't told you. People's going to come to you, Dolly, you, Preston, and others out there listening. They're going to come to you and say, what is the story on that again? Is there something that you're afraid of? So be there for them, because they will come.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. They already are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every day. Yep. It's amazing.
Right.
I'm glad it's finally becoming something that people aren't shooting down or ridiculing or criticizing. It's important because they do exist, and we should be able to have a relationship with them. And it's important.
And
Yes.
we will.
Dolly kept her secret for years, like most contactees. Did not tell anybody. It just wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So now a lot of people are coming forward, and it's really encouraging.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about things like this, and many people have had experiences and never talked about it. I've seen quite a few of them. Of course, flying as much as I did, you see stuff.
Right,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Augie, you've had experiences, right? Yes? Yeah.
Yeah.
When you come on our show next
Yes, we're going to do that.
Yes, we are, definitely.
I
So
think that
everybody here, come look for him
next-
there next Monday. No,
Next
not next Monday. Yes, next Monday. Yeah.
uh,
I'm
I'll,
excited.
I'll spill the beans.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being with us. And gosh, I'm sorry that Nori couldn't be here, but I hope her friend is good. So, anyway, well, thank you very much for being here, Preston and Dolly. And we will see you again, if not before, on Monday.
Okay,
Thanks, Augie.